Welcome to the Wonder Cinema podcast,
where we wonder about cinema.
I'm filmmaker and film critic Brian Henry Martin.
And I'm cinema historian and author Dr. Sam Manning.
We're going to tell the remarkable story of one cinema, but not just any cinema, the Wonder Cinema of Ireland.
Picture Palace from the Golden Age, which showed the greatest films and hosted the biggest movie stars.
For more than 50 years, it entertained thousands of people a night, but then floods and flames would end its reign.
And where is it now?
So join us on a trip which takes us from the Wizard of Oz
to Reservoir Dogs
to the Wonder Cinema of Ireland, the Ritz, Belfast. 1980, the year of the Rubik's Cube, Pac-Man, and in June the return of cinema to Fisherwick Place in Belfast. Welcome to episode 6 of the Wonder Cinema. Out of the ashes of 1977 and standing as a wreck for several years came the ABC Film Centre. But beauty had been replaced by a beast, Dr. Sam.
Yeah, so as you said, the cinema was bombed in 1977 and had to close. At that time, there was lots of speculation about what would happen next. Even as far back as the early 1970s, lots of people had speculated that the cinema might be divided into several different screens.
Multiplex.
This had happened to lots of older cinemas in other parts of the UK. They had been subdivided into several screens, which enabled them to show more films, offer more choice. So this was generally the way that things were going. And that is exactly what happens. In 1980, the ABC Film Centre opens, but with 4 screens instead of 1.
Now, is it remarkable that the cinema came back at all? You know, there are so many cinemas in Belfast that during this period that were damaged or bombed during the Troubles, died and never returned. But like a phoenix from the flames, it does come back. I mean, that has to be remarkable in itself.
I think it is remarkable, and I think it's impressive on the part of the exhibitors that they still have confidence to reopen a cinema in spite of everything that's happened. Not just the fact that attendances are declining, and they would continue to decline until 1983, 84, which was the real nadir of cinema attendance, but also the fact that the cinema had been bombed, basically. For them to come back, I think is pretty remarkable.
And it's not as if the political situation looked brighter. It did not. 1980 and then certainly into 1981, the hunger strikes. I mean, I remember that period. That was a really dark time, but it feels like every year was a dark time. But incredible that it comes back at all. Now, tell me about the multiplex. I mean, the impact of that across cinema in general. What was the point of that? What did that do? How did that change the cinema experience?
Yeah, so I think what's happening here is really a bit of a precursor to the multiplex. So the first purpose-built multiplex cinema opened in Milton Keynes in 1985.
No, wait. We have a multiplex here in Belfast in 1980, Sam.
Well,
this is the first purpose-built multiplex.
I would argue that this is slightly different as a conversion of an existing cinema, but I suppose you could make an argument that this was destroyed and a new cinema is created in its place. I guess Belfast needs all it can get at this point, so we can claim it as the first multiplex.
So the Wonder Cinema returns as a film centre, but the largest screen here, Sam, is 551 seats. Now that is a quarter of what the Ritz used to be. It's a completely different viewing experience. And there's a screen here that's only 215 seats. You'd fit more in the cafe, Sam. I mean, this feels slightly sad to me.
It feels sad to me as well when you think of the fact that at one point Belfast had, 40 or 50 of these single screen theatre type buildings, to then see this kind of Frankenstein of what previously was there. And because of this smaller size, you're not able to host any different types of events. Now it is purely a cinema venue.
Now, in terms of Frankenstein, in terms of the slicing of the cinema here, do we have any sense of, was it the balcony was cut into, or the stalls, or how this was actually subdivided?
So as I understand it, the former balcony was split into 2 screens, and then there was 2 screens downstairs as well. There was no cafe anymore.
What?
Unfortunately, not. No rotating buffet for you to get your lunch at. This was just a waiting area now. So it's a very kind of pared back version of what was there before.
Okay, but hey, look, we're being positive. Okay, the cinema has returned. There are films being shown inside. We're going to talk about some of those films, but outside, Sam, surely that gigantic structure remains intact.
Well, there's good news and bad news here. So the good news is that broadly the structure is still kind of as it was, and if you look at the steps at the front of the building and the tiles immediately surrounding those stairs, they pretty much look the same as they always have.
Okay, and just stop there. don't look anywhere else.
Yeah. Everywhere else, unfortunately, has changed quite a bit.
No.
So think back to the first episode, and we described the big tower rising up at the corner of the building.
A giant Art Deco tower, luminous, like a lighthouse of neon that shone across the city with the name Ritz emblazoned upon it.
Yeah, you put it more eloquently than I ever could. Unfortunately, that's gone.
What?
That's gone. The roof has been reconstructed, and it looks like, to accommodate the new roof, they've had to get rid of that. The windows on the front of the building are still there. The original tiles, it looks like, are still there, but they've been painted over in this kind of strange orangey beige colour, which you probably couldn't pick a less appealing colour if you'd have tried. So the shell of it is there, and there are elements that remind you of those glory days, but it has also fundamentally changed in quite a lot of ways.
It looks to me like a Soviet carpet factory. I mean, it's a bomb-proof carbuncle. I mean, if Gracie Fields or Cary Grant turned up, they wouldn't recognise the place, Sam, that's for sure. But you can understand it to a certain degree. The city centre was continuing to be bombed and parts of it destroyed, so they were not going to spend money on an exterior. I mean, we talk about brutalism. I mean, this was brutal architecture right here.
Another feature that has also gone is the old canopy. Yeah, that's been removed. It was there up until the late 70s, but that has also gone. Maybe that's because they don't think they'll be getting the queues that they had in the past. Maybe it's a safety issue there.
It's certainly not because there's no rain anymore. We know that's one thing for sure. Okay, Sam, so beauty has turned into a beast. But cinema-wise, we have films. It's a film centre. So if we were patrons back in June of 1980, what films could we have went and seen?
Well, when the ABC reopened in June 1980, there were 4 films showing. They were Apocalypse Now, which I think is interesting when we think back to the last episode and we talked about the rise of all these new American directors and the popularity. In that sense, it picks up where it's left off from.
That's what I'm talking about. That's the wonder cinema right there. It opens with Apocalypse Now. Come on.
Then we have 10, we have Electric Horseman, and we have Mission Galactica, The Cylon Attack.
See, that's a great lineup, isn't it?
And I think this is the whole point of subdividing into screens, is that you can offer choice. So these are 4 films that are quite different from one another. So yeah, people can come. They may not necessarily come with a film in mind even. They might come and see which film they want to see. So it's a slightly different concept in terms of how people go to the cinema and their attitude towards what they go to see.
But now, Sam, beyond the bombers and the architects, there was a bigger threat to cinema in the 1980s, and that was home video. So tell us what impact VHS, Betamax, all of that had upon the cinema-going experience.
Yeah, well, there's a home video boom in the early 80s. I'm sure we all know the story of how VHS beats Betamax to the home video crown. Initially, it's very expensive, but as prices come down, it kind of spreads across the province. And I think a lot of that is to do with what's happening at the time. People aren't necessarily willing to go out to the cinema, so home video is particularly appealing. There's also lots of challenges because people aren't necessarily buying the legal versions of the films that they're watching at home. Pirating is rampant, which is obviously an issue for exhibitors because lots of films are released, not released legally, but they are available on video before they're even shown at the cinema. So there are loads and loads of reports about copies of E.T. circulating even before it's released in cinemas in Northern Ireland.
We spoke about Steven Spielberg in the last episode with Jaws, and now E.T. plays a significant part in this cinema.
There was a special screening of E.T. At the ABC Film Centre, which was special for a number of reasons. Firstly, it was on a Sunday.
What?
Before the bomb, the Ritz, the ABC never screened films on Sunday, so it's special in that respect. It's also a Northern Ireland premiere, and they have special guests. So we've had Gracie Fields, we've had Cary Grant, and now we have BBC Radio 1 DJ Peter Powell. So while the screening is playing, he steps out of the auditorium and calls Noel Edmonds live on air to tell him about this charity screening that is taking place, and it's all part of a Radio 1 fundraiser. So this is a big event. E.T. is the film of the moment, and given what I just said about E.T. being pirated so much, an obvious question from the press is, are you worried about the rise of pirate video? Basically what the manager says is, no, because we still think cinema has a social function. People will still want to see the film because they still want to come out to be with people. He still believes that cinema still has an important role in terms of courtship and couples going out. Now, this might just be wishful thinking and kind of boosterism, but it is kind of interesting, that kind of tension between E.T. being on home video and then it playing at the cinema as well.
So the ABC Film Centre, despite all of this, flourishes in the early 80s. Cinema begins to take an upturn, certainly with blockbuster films that were on offer. But once again, it changes ownership and changes name.
So it changes from the ABC Film Centre to the Canon. So Canon was an Israeli company which made some quite questionable films during the 1980s and also ventured into exhibition. So they bought the chain from Thorn EMI in 1986, and then the ABC then changed its name to the Canon in 1987.
So that's a big shift, isn't it? Because it had been the ABC since the late 1930s. So this is a major movement. And the Canon 4-screen centre, that's what I remember. And I would have come to this cinema, this was my introduction to this cinema, around 1986, 1987. And the cinema itself was winning awards, Sam, at the very moment that I entered into the story.
Absolutely. In 1987... the Canon Film Centre won 4th prize in the Schweppes Cinema of the Year.
Come on!
I don't want to knock this too much. I'm sure it was a great achievement at the time. But it definitely feels, a step down, or, well, many steps down from the 1930s when this is being promoted as the wonder cinema of Ireland to becoming 4th place in Schweppes Cinema of the Year.
Now, despite the fact that it has turned into a film centre, an early version of the multiplex, there is talk, Sam, in the late 80s that it may be moving location. There are whispers of this happening. I mean, what's the kind of early thinking around that?
You start to see reports from the late 1980s that the days of the Canon might be over. They might be moving to a new site, a purpose-built cinema, perhaps more kind of fitting for this age. And that's partly in response to the fact that these new purpose-built multiplexes are being built in parts of Britain. They are very successful. They're kind of seen as a new concept in cinema going. Lots of these are built in out-of-town locations, in places like shopping centres where there is lots of parking, because people's habits are changing. They might prefer to go to an out-of-town shopping centre where they can easily get a parking space rather than these inner-city locations. So it's about that time that you get these rumours that the Canon is going to close and a new cinema will be opened in its place.
So within a few years, we've gone from 1 screen to 4 screens to now potentially 9, 10 screens. And that's what audiences are kind of demanding. And as you say, the car becomes a significant factor in the future of cinema here. I mean, if we look at the early photographs of the Ritz, there is car parking at the side of the building for maybe 10 cars. And who's that for? Like the cinema manager, Cary Grant's chauffeur? I mean, who's parking? People are coming by public transport. These cinemas are built around public transport, but no longer, Sam. The car is going to dictate where cinemas are.
Yeah, and when there was an announcement made in 1990 that this new cinema will open, part of the kind of package that they are presenting is that there will be a car park.
Oh, hey, a car park
at the rear of the cinema, which you don't sound very thrilled by. But I actually think people hearing that in 1990, it would have been something that they would have found appealing, because it enables them to easily get to and from the cinema.
But wait, Sam, there's going to be a last dance for the Canon 4 screen when in 1991 a charity event featuring the new Laurence Olivier and Vivien Leigh, Ken and M, Kenneth Branagh and Emma Thompson, with the film Dead Again, a UK premiere. Surely the glory days of the Ritz are back at the Canon 4 screen.
I think this is more of a last hurrah than a revisiting of the glory days, but it's definitely a coup to get Kenneth Branagh over. He has been in Belfast before promoting films, so he would have previously been at the Queen's Film Theatre promoting Henry V when that came out, but he's definitely staying true to his Belfast roots, and he always returns whenever he can, and that's obviously a big boon to people in Belfast to see this one of their own appearing on the big screen. One of the things that he does while he's over here is go to visit his grandmother, Elizabeth Branagh, on York Street. So maybe that's his reason for coming, just to see family, and appearing at the Canon is just part of that.
So Dead Again, obviously a kind of over-the-top Hitchcock thriller, Ken and M and dual roles. And the fact that the film is called Dead Again, and the Canon cinema would be dead again pretty soon here, Sam. So there has to be something in that. So after all the speculation, Sam, it is announced that the cinema will close on the 1st of July 1993. And a new cinema will open. But in those last few months, some key films play. Reservoir Dogs in May 1993 plays at the Canon Cinema. And to me, this is quite significant when you look at the journey that we've been on and the history of cinema in itself.
Yeah, so in the Second World War, we have The Wizard of Oz, and in 1993 we have Reservoir Dogs, which is about 50 years apart, but it almost feels longer than that. It just is two completely different, separate worlds in which these two films exist. They're playing at the same venue, but half a century apart, and it's just the kind of the structure of the building might be in place, but everything else around it has completely shifted.
Somewhere over the rainbow, Sam. I'm stuck in the middle with you. So the cinema is to close, and I mean, we talked about Dead Again being prophetic in some way, but the films that are playing when this cinema closes, I mean, this is extraordinary.
So we have The Vanishing, representing the cinema that would very shortly vanish forever. We have Falling Down, for the cinema that would, giving away a spoiler here, would soon be demolished. It would fall down. And we have Indecent Proposal. So it's the indecent proposal of the former Wonder Cinema going in place of this new shiny multiplex to lure people back to the cinema.
So the cinema closes on the 1st of July 1993. But what is to replace it, Sam? Where is the new Wonder Cinema?
It's moved to Dublin Road. So we've moved away from Fisherwick Place, which we spoke so much about being this hub of entertainment throughout the 30s, 40s, 50s and 60s. But with the closure of the Canon in 1993, that really goes. The Opera House is still there, but previously it's been renovated and reopened. The New Vic closed as a cinema in 1987 and kind of struggled along as a bingo venue for a few years. But this whole site is no longer the centre of entertainment that it once was. And when the new cinema opens, it moves location, which is only a very short distance, but I think it's more of a cultural shift to the Dublin Road. Well, maybe you could say a bit about what that area was like in the early 1990s.
Well, it moved to a car park. The Dublin Road itself, I mean, it's more South Belfast. It's more cultural. There was an art gallery on the Dublin Road. You're between QFT, the kind of cultural cinema, and the BBC. So it kind of feels like it's taken itself out of the city centre and into a more cultural quarter, I think is a way to look at it. So the new Wonder Cinema then, Sam. Tell me about this new... What is the new Wonder Cinema?
Well, there are a few other things that have happened. So, firstly, the company has been bought over by MGM. So when the cinema reopens or is rebuilt, it reopens as the MGM.
Wow.
Which I think has a lot more glamour to it than the Canon. It kind of evokes those glory days of Hollywood, doesn't it? And see that kind of the image of the lion over the entrance of the cinema.
I'm seeing Ben-Hur again. I'm seeing Chariot Race.
But the opening film is Jurassic Park, which again is a big event. You know, this is a real big blockbuster of that time. And in lots of ways, you think it's almost trying to replicate what happened on the opening night in 1936. Yeah. So, for instance, I have a quote here which says, "It is widely considered by the management that celebrities will be unnecessary as the multiplex will be the celebrity itself."
Hey, yes.
Which I think is wishful thinking, but I'd say having the film and a big celebrity like Gracie Fields or Cary Grant is a much bigger deal than not having the celebrity.
That's incredible. So it moves to the MGM 10 screens, Sam. So that is pretty epic. Brand new cinema. How exciting for Belfast. And it bills itself as the ultimate cinema experience. I mean, that's kind of Wonder Cinema language right there. And as you say, Jurassic Park, the same night as the London premiere, and Steven Spielberg sends a fax. And the staff of the MGM gather around the fax machine, and the fax comes through. And Spielberg, on the 15th of July, 1993, his fax says,
"Good evening, Belfast. Sit back and have fun as the dinosaurs come to life."
Now, I mean, this is pretty exciting. I went to see Jurassic Park in the MGM, and I was excited at that moment. But little did I realise that we had left behind the Ritz, the ABC, the Wonder Cinema.
There's definitely a kind of myopia here what they're trying to sell this as the new Wonder Cinema, almost without any realization of what had gone before. And a lot of the things that they're trying to promote are things that existed previously but were then left behind. So they say it has this kind of new area where people can buy food to go into the cinema. They show off about the different architectural features of the building. So there's a big advert that shows off that they have used 2,100 litres of emulsion and eggshell paint. So that kind of harks back. So if you remember to episode 1 where we talked about the opening brochure and how the cinema tried to sell itself, and they had all this stuff and that had kind of faded away throughout the years for various reasons. It's almost like they're trying to start again, but it kind of feels like this is a slightly watered down version of everything that they were trying to achieve in 1936.
And of course what the MGM cinema had was a car park, a multi-story car park, and that really is the future of where cinemas have gone. While the shininess is glowing from the MGM Grand, what has happened to our Wonder Cinema site, Sam? What has happened there?
Well, so after it closed in 1993, the building stays there for a while, but in 1994, the building is then unfortunately demolished. We have pictures of it being demolished, which are obviously very sad to look at. This is actually one of the few opportunities you have to see the interior of the building as it would have looked like in its kind of period as the ABC Film Centre and the Canon. So you kind of get a sense of how the building has been divided. And people obviously did care enough about this to take pictures, and there were a few articles talking about how it used to be the Ritz, but I don't think there is really a full understanding of the architectural heritage of the building. One of the few people that does speak out on this issue is Michael Open, who was the head of QFT, and he says in the local press that the Ritz is a very important cinema for Northern Ireland. It's a pity someone didn't put a preservation order on it. But that's not really on the cards at the time.
We spoke in episode 1 about the money that was spent on the fixtures and furnishings of the Wonder Cinema, the £10,000 or more that was spent on the organ itself. Sam, what has happened to all of that? Does any of this remain? Is there any trace of the cinema anywhere?
There are fortunately some traces of the organ, which end up in some rather unexpected places. So some of the pipes from the organ end up in a pub. Yes, a pub. In Hertfordshire in England, which is quite, well, firstly miraculous that a pub would decide to have an organ, but that these parts from Belfast would end up, the organ was built in England and came over to Northern Ireland, so maybe it's trying to make its way home. The console is now in a location in Wales. It's well looked after by someone who collects many of these cinema organs. So yeah, it's been split up and dispersed, but it is still here in some form, fortunately.
And the only thing that remains are people's memories. The people who went to the cinema and remember those amazing nights and the films that they saw and the dates that they went on and the dreams that they had. That's all that really remains today, Sam, is what is left in people's imaginations.
Absolutely, and I think that's why it's so important to preserve and capture those memories. For instance, I remember talking to Noel Spence, who I think many listeners will know as the owner of the Tudor Cinema, which is his own 1950s style cinema in his back garden. And I remember telling me that his first cinema trip was in 1952 to a screening of Jack and the Beanstalk as a child, and that is what got him hooked on cinema, made him want to go back, made him want to make his own films, made him want to recreate the glamour of the 1950s cinemas in his back garden. So it's memories like that really resonate with me, and I think there are thousands of equivalent memories across Northern Ireland from people who went to the Ritz.
Now the site obviously became a car park because everything does. A car park or a coffee shop. But it's now a hotel, which we visited in episode 1. And people from all over the world come and sleep in this hotel. So it's still a place of dreams. Okay, Sam, I'm clutching straws here. It's still a place of dreams. I wonder if anyone dreams of Gracie Fields or Cary Grant or The Wizard of Oz or even Reservoir Dogs. Sadly now, the Wonder Cinema only exists in our dreams. Hey, thanks for listening. You've been a great audience.
If you've enjoyed your visit to the Wonder Cinema, let us know.
Our theme music is composed by the wonderful people at Score Draw Music.
Check out the links below and visit our website where you can see pictures and leave your thoughts and comments.
So until the next screening,
The Wonder Cinema is closed.